This week's blog post is a visit to the Wadsworth Atheneum, part 20. My previous post on the Wadsworth Atheneum included Rococo porcelain from France and Germany, which was created in the mid-18th century. This week we move on to works of the French Revolution, which began in 1789. If you enjoy this post, you might want to read my posts on art from 1801 to 1815. I've given you the links to those in the blog post. On the left is a portrait of the Duchesse de Polignac wearing a straw hat by Elizabeth Louise Vigee Le Brun. It was done in 1782. The original is at the Metropolitan Museum. That's it up here. This copy was made by Vigee Le Brun at the request of Marie Antoinette. The Duchess of Polignac, one of the great beauties of her day, was the Queen's good friend and the governess to the royal children. For her portrait, she's wearing the loose muslin gown that the Queen and her ladies preferred on informal occasions to the rigors of corsets and hoops, which is this sort of dress. Note to self, find out how this shepherdess costume relates to the sort of empire waist dress so popular 30 years later in the Regency period in England, as seen in Bridgerton, over here, and innumerable Jane Austen movies. The Duchess of Polignac and her family fled France after the fall of Bastille in 1789. She died soon after learning of Marie Antoinette's execution. This is The Storm, 1787, by Claude Joseph Vernet. Vernet's preferred subjects were nature at her extremes. Here a ship is wrecked and survivors are struggling to stay afloat, while those on the shore watch in horror. A similar example by Vernet is at the National Gallery in London. That's down here. I happen to like this one better because the lightning and the castle make it more interesting. Vernet, who was born in 1714, lived for 20 years in Rome, where he absorbed Italian views on landscape and created paintings that were popular with English aristocrats on the Grand Tour. This was the same market, the same wealthy market, that Canaletto painted for. In 1753, Vernet returned to Paris, where he spent the rest of his career. Despite the apparent foreboding in this 1787 painting, Vernet died the same year as the French Revolution, but peacefully in his bed. This is the lictors bringing Brutus the bodies of his sons, painted in 1789 or later. Here's the story. In 509 BC, Lucius Junius Brutus helped expel the last king of Rome, Tarquinius Superbus. When two of Brutus's sons conspired to reinstate the Tarquin monarchy, he ordered them executed. Here Roman officials bring the bodies of the sons home. Brutus contemplates the effects of his orders as his family wails with grief. Brutus was regarded as a hero who chose to maintain the newly founded Roman Republic no matter the cost to himself. The original of David's very large painting, down here, is 10 by 13 feet. It was displayed in the Paris Salon of 1789 when the French Revolution had already begun. It was purchased for the Louvre in that year. This smaller copy was done by one of David's studio assistants or followers. Jacques-Louis David, trained in the Rococo style, was the originator of neoclassical painting in France and its best exponent. The new style harked back to the severe and dignified mood of the Roman Republic, with noble and heroic figures determined to suffer and die if necessary to defend their principles. To emphasize the setting in the Roman Republic, David has incorporated details of ancient Roman costume, furniture, and architecture that were modeled on recent archaeological excavations in Italy. David's own contribution, which is seldom evident in the neoclassicists who followed him, was a sense for drama and emotional impact. Here he created that impact by means of the contrast between the upright, stoic men on the left and the huddle of wailing women on the right. David was an active supporter of the French Revolution and a friend and ally of Robespierre. After Robespierre's execution in 1794, David aligned himself with Napoleon, painting stirring tributes such as this one of Napoleon crossing the Alps, 1801, and the Coronation of Napoleon, 1806, which is a stunning 20 by 30 feet. After Napoleon's defeat, David went into self-imposed exile in Brussels and the Netherlands until his death in 1825. For more on David and his milieu, see my book Seismic Shifts in Subject and Style, 19th Century French Painting and Philosophy. Next up, around 1793, King Louis XVI saying farewell to his family. Mather Brown was a student of Gilbert Stuart and of Benjamin West, who, like Brown, was American-born but working in England. Brown imagines the royal family's grief and shock as scowling soldiers come to haul Louis XVI off to the guillotine on January the 21st, 1793. Marie Antoinette was executed 9 months later. Brown is clearly more sympathetic to the royal family than he is to the revolutionaries. Next up, 1794, plundering the king's cellar at Paris. Johann Zoffany, 1733 to 1810, a German painter in the neoclassical style, was active in England, Italy, and India. He was famous for his portraits, particularly of actors and actresses, and of the British and Austrian royal families. His sympathies in this painting clearly lie with King Louis XVI, rather than with the rabble who are guzzling the royal wine. A side note, in Gilbert and Sullivan's Pirates of Penzance, the Major General boasts, "I can tell undoubted Raphaels from Gerard Dow's and Zoffany's. I know the croaking chorus of the frogs of Aristophanes." Raphael was one of the most prominent painters of the High Renaissance, the early 16th century. That's him on the far left. Gerard Dow was a follower of Rembrandt in the late 17th century. That's him in the center. And Zoffany is 18th century. And the last one this week, painted around 1797, Jean-Antoine Rouchet in prison. Rouchet, the subject of this small painting, was a disciple of Voltaire and the translator of Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations into French. In 1779, Rouchet wrote a poem praising Louis XVI, which earned him a salt tax collectorship. 10 years later, he supported the French Revolution, but denounced the tyranny of demagogues such as Robespierre. In October 1793, during the Reign of Terror, he was arrested. On July 25, 1794, Rouchet was guillotined along with his friend, the poet André Chénier. He's best known today as one of the characters in Umberto Giordano's opera André Chénier. Hubert Robert probably painted this work as a memento for Rouchet's family. Robert himself was also arrested in October 1793 and sent to the same prison as Rouchet. A prisoner with a similar name was erroneously guillotined in Robert's place. A week after Robespierre was guillotined, Robert was released. DianeDurantewriter.com has hundreds of posts on sculpture, painting, architecture, and my many other obsessions. To join the free Sunday Recommendations email list, visit the URL that's on the screen or email me. And you can say, "Well done, Diane," or support my work and receive rewards by means of the tip jar on DianeDurantewriter.com. As always, thank you for listening.